Hello everyone. So I'll just cut to the chase. I had a totally different script planned out for this video and decided to scrap it last second for something completely new. I really didn't feel like I was doing this topic justice with the original one, and it kind of just evolved into talking about every Fixa, which on paper sounds good, but I don't really think it sells just how defining Abandac, Blaster, and unwix are. So with that being said, let's actually get into the video, I'll just start off by saying that clears of stuff are overall an accomplishment, regardless of if you're using Abandac, unwix, and Blaster or not. In the end of the day, it really just comes down to wallet size and how much of a setup you're willing to spend and how far someone is willing to go to get that solo major suppression target. For power creep makes it easy enough, or a new world record fast time for Trainia in Arc's record. I'll get my thoughts of this out of the way too early on. I'm not delusional. Honestly, I could be doing far better in runs, but I choose not to put too much time these days. A lot of my reasoning why this happens is because of Abandac and unwix gaming. I'm just not willing to spend all that money on extra weapons on gear that I'll eventually replace just for faster times. It's just not worth it. Whether or not this turns people off from watching my runs is understandable, but I'll always give Arc's records my all as long as I'm still happy to run a current Arc record and I'm having fun with it. I'll just say that unwix, and to the same extent, Abandac, are very demotivating factors for me though. I think Blaster is the lesser of the three evils because it's restricted to full-time blast performance, but it still plays a pretty minor role, I'd say too. This is a topic I touched up upon towards the start of the year. I'd say back then things were pretty bad purely because every older Fixa and Wix were complete garbage by comparison. I mean, 5% Fixa attack potency versus 12% Fixa Abandac potency is laughable. Fast forward to July and August of the same year, we've gotten various buffs to Fixas, either by them getting stronger or getting moderately high levels on Fixa much easier to obtain. Thanks to preset substitutes being given away in treasure scratches, SG scratches, and yet preset support items. All of this is great for making Fixas more attainable. However, the core issue of Fixas hasn't really been fixed at all. Obviously, I'm talking about the Three Musketeers and sub-weapon usage. I know, I already talked about this earlier this year, but what the heck, might as well go at it again, As it was touched up upon before, sub-weapon usage is pretty normal in speedrunning, both in base PSO2 and in NGS. This isn't exactly some new thing. The applications and usage of multi-weapons do, however, differ quite a bit comparing base to NGS. A lot of base's sub-weapons usage came from PP batteries, movement weapons, weird gimmick weapons with specific purposes, weapons that could cast Shifta and Deepen at the same time, and rainbow builds, which basically are just elemental weapons for various elements. While these did play a fact in allowing for faster runs or providing unique utility, I'd argue the sub-weapon usage was far more interesting here, and to my knowledge, outside of Hell and Bafina, which Global didn't even get, I don't think any other sub-weapons ever had a make it or break it moment that you can't clear the content. Correct me if I'm wrong, however, because it's been like 3 years and remembering everything about base can be tough after so much time has passed. Anyways, fast forward to NGS, and sub-weapons have almost entirely axed the concept of unique niche weapons for a different situation scenario, and now are exclusively stat sticks which provide massive raw damage boosts. To the average casual player watching my videos, this probably won't impact you whatsoever, but what if I told you that without these Fixas that are being used as sub-weapons, clearing something like Malignant Darkfall's Solace solo might not have been possible for quite some time, or at least until sufficient power creep in the form of level. Malignant Darkfall's Solace is, in my opinion, probably one of the more egregious uses of sub-weapons. Did I use that right? Dalian is up there too because it made heavy use of unwix for most classes as well. Now, one thing I do want to note is that a lot of these problems also stem from how massive of an HP pool these bosses have in solo scaling. It's far more easier to trio, duo, or run with a full party than it is to solo, and the gap of how much ground you have to cover solo is absolutely massive. A lot of this is because, in my opinion, these quests are poorly balanced for solos, even with regular best in slot gear. Some of the first solo clears pre-Grand Gladiator, such as Reversa's solo clear, which I highly recommend checking out. It's an absolutely crazy run and very good. Anyways, they had 2 Fixa Abandac wingguards with different EX logs and a Fixa unwix wingguard. Yeah, 3 Fixas just a solo one fight is pretty wild, Without Abandac and unwix, there's a good chance solo clearing the fight wouldn't have even been possible considering at the time of this video, All of the current soul clears are within a 10-second or so mark of time. So I quickly went over major suppression targets, and the reason for that is obviously because while it is a gear and skill check, the result is kind of sort of pay to win if you want to clear that fight solo. It's not something most players can even do anyways, so whatever. It's not exactly part of the problem, but it's at the very least worth mentioning. I do wish my paltry Fatale free Wingard was enough to clear it myself, but the damage difference is pretty dang clear from just having Abandac and unwix. So let's talk about something pretty much everyone can do, though, which is the main issue. ARCS records. So I'm hoping pretty much everyone watching this video knows what they are, because if you don't, seriously, what are you doing, living under a rock? Unwix absolutely dominates quite a few of these records, and thus giving everyone using it a 17% damage increase providing its max level, and the record in question, as long as it's something it isn't something like Face the Darkness where you have 100% weak point uptime. Also, I should also point out, not everyone's going to have Fixa, unwix, and Abandac, but you know, people who do use it will have a pretty definite advantage if their skill is just as good as their gear. I mean, you could be those lovely ARCS record cheaters who don't need any of that to begin with, but shaving Yasu God publicly isn't very cool of me. I'm quite toxic, huh? Seriously, the fact we have people cheating in ARCS records is pretty sad, but I guess that's something we have to deal with now. Anyways, I seem to have gotten too distracted by my dislike for cheaters in NGS, but I can't really help myself, huh? Unwix dominates a lot of these records with mobbing and very little weak point uptime. Some prime examples of this include Fleeting Flight, where the only enemy is Bujin, Quarterstaff, which is Engoku, a boss that any decent run with the best in slot gear will only see the weak point exposed at the very least once. And quite a few mobbing records like Narrow Cage, for example. Honestly, a lot of mobbing ARCS records strongly benefit from Wix, because whenever you're dealing with normal enemies, you aren't hitting a weak point a lot of the time, and that's really the case for a lot of Dolls enemies. A lot of Starless enemies do have exposed weak points, but honestly, the fact that a lot of Dolls bosses have only temporarily exposed cores or no cores at all until a part is broken is part of the issue why unwix is so strong. Abandac also plays a part, and I'll get to this in a second. So why is Abandac so powerful even after every other Fixa got buffed earlier this year? Well, the biggest attribution towards this is due to how much potency floor we have. It's given us less reliance on needing critical hits, since critical hits will always deal max damage variance and then add whatever your critical damage multiplier is. With higher potency floor, it's better to start taking raw potency over crit or crit damage. With some of the strongest gear we have right now, you can probably hit around 78% or so potency. Maybe someone can correct me in the comments. That isn't to say Fixa Fatale is bad, because it's still quite good, honestly. However, Abandac and unwix are as strong as they are purely because of their raw potency gains, which is pretty much something that completely overtakes whatever Fatale can give on its own. And of course, if you're a Slayer, Fixa Termina is still Fixa Termina. Fixa Attack, at the very least, does come as a bit of a bootleg Fixa Abandac because it's 10% potency now, but it's something, but yeah. As Figs stand, I'd argue we're leaning more towards pot floor plus raw potency meta as opposed to critical hit and crit damage meta, especially at the higher end of gameplay in ARCS records because of these two Fixas. A lot of this is also because Fixa Abandac and unwix partially enable this, but we'd probably be using Fixa Attack, Wix, and Blast or otherwise if they didn't exist, honestly. So Abandac and unwix especially define NGS and its speedrunning meta because the raw potency they provide completely overtakes every other Fixa. This leaves us in a weird spot where the old Fixa are perfectly okay to use for normal gameplay, however it creates a rather ugly competitive atmosphere. If you want to compete with others in ARCS records, you at the very least need Fixa Abandac, which in of itself requires a specialized build of 20 unique fixes. Given this has been easier to achieve over time, especially with the Triel capsules and the S capsules as well as the 7 augment slot, but it still requires all the good stuff like Gland Gigas Maste, Lux Halfinal, and Grand Gladiusol, so take of that what you will. So did I mention it? Honestly, I forget. Anyways, I feel this does ruin the competitive part of ARCS records. I feel we're getting to a point where it would be a really good idea to standardize gear and records so that everyone can be on the same playing field, and sub-weapon meta can be diverted over to major suppression targets and such where it isn't that big of an issue overall. Instead, can punish usage of using other class weapons and killing off people trying to use sub-katana for an easier time clearing by including 20% main class weapon potency, I feel they can do this too for gear. I mean, hey, they fixed the lead enemies and records. They made ARC's records take a fraction of the time they used to, so maybe this isn't completely out of the question. There are better ways to make gear relevant with harder fights and content. It just hasn't been done very much beyond major suppression targets and time extension quests, which, by the way, are dead. Thank you, Sega. With that, I basically run out of things to talk about with this topic. I hope everything I talk about here is pretty accurate, and this isn't just a repeat of everything I talked about in January. That'd be pretty embarrassing. I know quite a few people that have dropped out of records or take it less seriously these days due to the whole Fixa sub-weapon meta NGS has developed this year, and it's pretty sad to see, honestly, especially because I feel it too. Given it won't stop me from running, but time investment-wise, I don't sweat it as much as I used to. I'm pretty sure I drove some of my friends crazy in the past because I did. I am so sorry, Kumi. Honestly, speedrunning is something I do enjoy in NGS, even if there's no substantial rewards. So what do you guys think about Fixa's and ARC's records meta currently in regards to sub-weapons? With that being said, thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.